Hello Berlin, welcome to Radio Spaetkauf. This is the Berlin podcast. We bring you all the stories from the city, what's going on in politics, public transport, bicycles, U-Bahns, police, bars, everything you need to know to feel like a local in Berlin. And on tonight's show, we're going to be talking about a reignition of tension between police and punks living in squats, with massive raids in Rigaer Straße and retaliatory car burnings across the city. Not only that, but the Red Army faction has resurfaced, and we're going to be asking, is it the 90s all over again? My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and joining me tonight here live in Donau 115 is Dan Stern, comedian extraordinaire. Hey Dan, how you doing?
I'm good, Joel. How are you?
I'm great. Where have you been lately?
I was in New York for a week or so. That was fun. Here's how I'll tie it back to us. I saw a T-shirt in a shop window that said, "Ich bin ein Brooklyner."
Brooklyner.
Yeah, so that's just... We've completely taken any meaning out of anything that sentence ever once had.
We've also got Joeran Mandik. How you doing?
Well, as well. Thank you.
Been busy?
I haven't been to New York. I've actually been nowhere but here. I think I've lost my travel bug recently.
That's good. We want you on the ground collecting stories. Don't go anywhere, please. Unlike the lovely Maisie, who unfortunately is not with us tonight, for all you Maisie fans. She's in
She's
England
not
again.
dead. That sounded...
At least we
She's
don't
still
think.
with us in the broader existential sense.
You're all here to hear the local news, so let's get on with it. We're going to start with one of the hottest topics that's around at the moment, which is the refugee issues, refugee crisis that's swamping Europe, of course, and that is affecting Berlin in many different ways. Here's an update from the refugee news.
Yeah, you have noticed many locations being built to house refugees around town. And now the city is creating a special one just for LGBT asylum seekers.
So this is a special accommodation centre for refugees, only for transsexual, lesbian and gay refugees, and it's opened in Treptow. The new centre can house up to 120 people, and this comes after complaints that there were attacks against non-straight refugees inside the existing camps. There were 95 such complaints between August and December last year, but it's not actually also just inside the camps. The asylum seekers have also complained about being insulted or mistreated by German security and bureaucracy because of their sexuality or gender. But actually the head of a gay support group called the Schwulenberatung, who are helping out the LGBT refugees, says that there's actually an estimated 3,500 gay, lesbian and transgender refugees in the city, which is far more than 120, so I hope they find a few extra beds in there. Although I'm interested about this topic, though. Do you think it's good to separate out people, or better to have everyone together so we all have to, learn to live alongside each other?
I mean, ostensibly this is temporary housing,
yes,
too. It's not, and so that's... But to whatever extent that turns out to be true or not probably determines whether or not it's an okay idea, but safety first?
Safety first, good idea.
There's also several thousand asylum seekers living in the old Tempelhof airport, and as a result, some big events that were scheduled there having to be moved over to Treptower Park, including Lollapalooza, which... yes, it is still the 90s, isn't it? Wow, that's still a thing.
We made fun of that a couple of episodes ago too, that Lollapalooza still exists. I think it's just a brand these days. It's just a festival with an old name. It doesn't actually have any connection to that thing right. Back in the 90s, when all the, when punk was, or whatever, grunge was going, really. That's what was happening.
Do I have to take swing lessons again?
So Treptower Park is actually a really nice corner of the city, as anyone who lives on this side of town knows. It doesn't get used very much, though, except as a park. There's a really nice Soviet monument there, and if you haven't seen it, I really recommend going along and having a look. It's very monumental. And now the whole area around the monument, although not actually the monument itself, but the area around it and everything to the Spree is going to be used for the music festival Lollapalooza, which takes place in early September. There's a pretty big lineup. It's going to be Radiohead, New Order, and Kings of Leon, which makes me pretty excited about it, actually. Although it's not cheap. It's $139 for 2 days, so, save up if you want to go. But, of course, just as soon as this was announced, there's been protests against it. Someone has started a petition on change.org to prevent the festival from taking place in the park because it would ruin the grass and the gardens and disturb the neighbours. I'm not going to sign that petition. What do you
neither.
think? I mean, my perspective, the parks are here to be enjoyed, I think, and if one day a year we get to have a music festival, I mean, okay. And the organisers have actually said they're going to replace any grass that gets, damaged.
Sure. Well, yeah. So maybe Lollapalooza can be a Lollapalooza winner for Treptower Park.
So,
Oh my God.
a little bit of history. It's not the first time Treptower Park has been used for music. In 1987, Bob Dylan and Tom Petty joined forces to play a concert in Treptower Park. Now remember, 87 was 2 years before the wall came down, and Treptower is in the east, so that would have been a pretty amazing event for all the members of the FTJ, when they the youth organization of the former East. If Maisie was here, she'd correct me about that. They gave away 81,000 tickets, so actually, it's got a pretty strong record of being a good place for music. So I say let it happen.
What was the state of the grass after that event, I wonder?
I don't know, but I'm sure the Stasi documented it carefully.
Was it? Moving on to city politics, we've got an update on the battle over Airbnb.
Yes, so Airbnb's illegal flats have been made illegal a while back already, and there was a grace period for people that registered their flats to be holiday places, and that grace period is now going to run out at the end of April. So if you were someone who was making a bit of money on the side, you might think about other ways of doing so.
Especially since the City Development Center senator, his name is Andreas Giesel, wants to force Airbnb to hand over customer data so they can enable prosecutions, although we're not sure how that's going to happen yet. But, they haven't done that yet, and a lot of people have been hiding behind the wall of Airbnb, hoping that they don't get caught out because they're somehow masking their address or something like that. But the city's on to you.
They're cracking down.
So more on city politics or city issues. Do you remember the Be Berlin slogan that the city has been using to promote itself? Has this and this zinger? Now the city's marketing office has come up with a new campaign slogan, and it is
365-24. Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Wait, is that for this year?
They're going to launch it in March.
There's 366 days this year.
Oh my God.
How do you not look that up? That's
Why do we have a new campaign, Yuri? What's going on?
I guess the people at Visit Berlin, that Berlin tourism agency, wanted a new campaign. And the good thing is
it's their job to come up with campaigns, and if they keep using the old one, they get fired, right?
the old one is from 2007 or 8, so it's about time, I guess, if you fancy doing some city marketing. But at least it didn't cost us anything, because last time the Be Berlin one was actually an ad agency that came up with it, and it was a whole tender process. And so this one was just internally, like just the people from Visit Berlin came up with it themselves, saying we're doing this guerrilla style.
Right.
It's not like they actually even need to do anything at all. The city is attracting plenty of tourists without any. I bet no tourist who visited at any time in the past 6-7 years has any idea that Be Berlin was a slogan, or that they certainly didn't get one extra visitor by having that slogan, did they?
No.
And now they're going to have to try and do some kind of complicated math. 365 divided by 24. I mean, like, what is this?
Oh, that's the number of hours in the day.
It's a bad idea.
It's a slash. What else is going on, Yuri?
Well, Joel, you've got an update on all the problems with the Bürgeramt. What's that?
I know everyone's sick of hearing about problems at the Bürgeramt. I'm really sorry that we keep talking about this. It's like the airport, or it's like the Stadschloss. They're just some things that we just have to talk about because they keep occurring. So a few weeks ago, the city offices all shut down. The Bürgeramt offices shut down so they could install a brand new computer system that was supposed to fix all the delays that we've all been experiencing. But instead of that, the new computer system actually resulted in 20% less appointments than before. I don't know if they're really trying. So there was an article in the paper, an editorial that said Berlin needs to stop working on the paperwork economy, stop functioning on the paperwork economy, that too many jobs here are just created just to create reams of documents in government offices, and that we need to find a way to digitize all of this. And it's something I've thought of too. Why can't you have just a digitized registration system where you just, email your documents to the Bürgeramt and they check them, and if they're suspicious, they call you in or something like that. Make an easier process, digitizing everything. And it's also the case, if you've ever been to the Finanzamt, as I had to recently because I had some tax problems, and if you sit down and talk to somebody there, they bring out a big folder with all your paperwork, and they actually have, physical, dusty, bits of paper with all your information on it. And I was always thinking, why don't they just, scan it all, stick it in a database somewhere online? But with all these things, you've got to be careful what you wish for, don't you? Because imagine if the Bürgeramt and the Finanzamt all did actually digitize all their documents and start connecting them all up. And then suddenly, the room for loopholes would certainly disappear when you're trying to do anything. Like everybody kind of does, taking a sick day when you're not really sick, and then maybe you get caught out because you used your ATM card at somewhere you shouldn't have. And, we've got to be really careful about wishing that the Bürgeramt would actually get efficient, because what would happen if they do might be scarier than the present situation.
Well, they'll first have to find someone competent to make some software.
Moving on to building news, Berlin needs houses. 10 new suburbs with 50,000 homes have been planned.
That's right. The city is growing incredibly fast. Almost 200 people move here every day. And a recent prognosis was made that the city will reach 4 million residents by the year 2020. It hasn't had that many residents since before World War II, and back then most of them were living in quite miserable slums with whole families sharing single rooms. So we have to really ask how we're going to do this without returning to those conditions. So the city's been struggling to keep up with demand for housing, which is why, of course, the price of buying and renting keeps going up. There's just simple supply and demand. So now the city government has announced plans to create 10 new suburbs around the city with up to 50,000 new apartments in them. They're going to be located in South Neukölln, somewhere in Mitte, around Tegel Airport, in Pankow, and in Stieglitz. So as well as regular homes, the city wants to ensure that there are flats for asylum seekers included in the new developments. But only a quarter of these flats are actually going to be built by the city-owned housing authorities. The rest are going to be constructed by private developers, so they won't be cheap. So I don't really know if any of us are going to be able to move there. So as well as these new suburbs, the city's housing minister also says he wants to encourage more building owners to construct apartments on the rooftops of the existing buildings. Up to 50,000 flats could be constructed on the rooftops, he says. So I guess basically we should all be prepared to have a bit of construction taking place in and around the city on top of our houses. That's just the price of living in a growing city, I guess.
Joel, you reckon there's something to be learned as well from that Gründerzeit?
Well,
maybe
you could tell us what the Gründerzeit is first, Yuri. What's the Gründerzeit?
That
Gründerzeit
means
is that period.
ground time.
Almost. Founder time. Founding time, maybe? It's the time where most of Berlin's apartments have been built, or at least a whole lot of them, which is the start of the 20th century and the end of the 19th. And still today, I live in one of these houses. I know most of us do. All of these big apartment buildings, sort of 4 to 5 levels, surrounding whole blocks. That's that era.
So the city was constructed during this time called the Gründerzeit. It just blossomed, basically. Well, it's worth remembering that the way that they actually constructed a lot of those apartments was very different to the way that we actually build houses these days. Back then, they were built by housing cooperatives, which were non-profit member-run organizations. They pooled the resources of thousands of citizens to construct these buildings at low cost, and they were good quality homes. So these days, mostly it's outsourced to private developers, and as a result, it's far more expensive. So I just think maybe we should try and be returning to a few of the old ideas of the Gründerzeit, when they had, basically it was proto-crowdfunding to build houses. And it worked, and that's how we have Berlin as it is today. So maybe we should be thinking back to those old methods.
One of those was just finished sort of on a corner of my street. And I like the idea that it's like, oh, we could all participate in this sort of thing, but it seems like everyone who lives in there has a flat screen on their ceiling, so it doesn't really feel like a proletariat movement for like home ownership.
It does depend on the way you roll it out. Yeah, at the moment there is a lot of it's still very expensive to join one of those kind of groups, but there's ways we could make it cheaper. And I think there's a lot of lessons from history we could learn. Berlin itself was built through a lot of innovative models that just have been forgotten. We could remember them. Now, Yuri, more on building news. You've got something to say about some new apartments going up in Mitte, is that right?
Yeah, right next to the memorial for the murdered Jews of Europe, where at the moment there are these one-story sort of provisionary wooden buildings housing pommes shops and
a Dunkin' Donuts.
And a Dunkin' Donuts, yeah. They're going to be demolished to make some space for an apartment building of 8 or 9 stories. But they're going to be luxury flats, of course.
I'm going to go on this with this one. I'm going to say, you know what, in the middle of Mitte, I mean, maybe luxury flats have to go somewhere. Not Tempelhof fell, but,
but
next to the Brandenburg Gate, I don't know.
We talked about that new approach that Friedrichshain Kreuzberg have taken and bought that building in Rigaer Straße. so that it wouldn't fall into the hands of investors just trying to put luxury flats and make money out of it. But apparently the Wohnungsbaugesellschaft Mitte, which is another city-owned company, they don't have the money to do that.
I mean, it's probably, in the end, like one story of like retail is not the best use of that space, right? Like that's
Dunkin' Donuts next to the Jewish memorial. It's
at least it is.
I do wonder about like $1 million condos overlooking a Holocaust memorial. That's
equally crass.
That seems like a super tough sell.
You're still with Radio Spaetkauf, and tonight we've got a guest to help us talk through one story. It's the main story that's been dominating the headlines in Berlin for the past month. So the city was, of course, once famous for its squats, its punks, and its protests. These days, most of the squats have been converted to regular flats. The punks are all getting a bit older, and there's less protests than there used to be. But despite that, this last month we've seen a flaring of tension between the police and left-wing activists in the district of Friedrichshain. There's been raids, car burnings, demos, and general overreaction from all sides in and around one particular squat on Rigaer Straße. And to tell us a bit more about it, we've got a special guest, which is John Riceberg. John, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Now, John is a columnist for Ex-Berliner, and he writes often about these topics, so he's the perfect man to have on the show to explain to us exactly what went down in Rigaer Straße over the past couple of weeks. John, what's happening there?
Yeah, do you guys know the bar, Aufsturz, in the Rigaer 78? Anyone?
I do not.
I've only crossed Warschauer Brücke like twice.
Okay. I'm a Neuköllner myself, but every once in a while it's nice to go over to Friedrichshain. Aufsturz is a very classical bar. There's lots of punks, lots of colored hair, lots of leather jackets, and kind of scruffy dogs. And just last night, actually, Saturday night, there was a huge police raid. They detained like 15 people for hours there, and that's just the latest episode in this kind of civil war that's been going on in Friedrichshain's Nordkiez for the last couple of months. If you go there now, at night you can be subject to just random controls, ID checks. They might search you. Kind of reminds you of a shady Baghdad neighborhood recently. And
what's behind it all, John? How did it all start?
Yeah, well, this has been going on for months, and it has to do with these tensions between the police and squatters. About 1 month ago, January 13th, there was a massive raid in the Rigaer Straße 94, which is one of the most important squats. There were about 500 police who stormed it, like a SWAT team, SAK they're called here, a helicopter. And they were there. It was kind of confusing when they put out the first press releases. They said they were looking for people who had attacked a police officer. Then it turned out the police officer had just kind of been shoved, and the people probably hadn't gone to the Rigaer Straße 94. And so the reason the police were going in there, they said they were looking for dangerous objects. Now this was new to me. I thought, I don't know. I mean, I'm from the States myself. We have warrants and judges and things like that. And I figured the police also couldn't just kick in your door just because they felt like it. But yeah, apparently they can. Apparently, 2006 Allgemeines Sicherheits- und Ordnungsgesetz (ASOG) in Berlin, that allows you, if the police feel there's an imminent danger, they can kick in your door. And this isn't like in the movies where you have the serial killer and the police go up to the house and they hear like, "Help! I've been kidnapped by a serial killer." Like, I would understand if they could kick in the door then.
Wait, which movie is that?
Like all of them?
Okay.
Yeah.
So there were actually 500 police sent in to chase after an alleged 4 people who had either maybe roughed up or somehow been in some kind of physical contact with a policeman on the street a few moments before and hours before.
Maybe, right. And this was 6 hours after the shoving incident. So the police spokesman admitted as well that he didn't think it was likely that 6 hours later the people were going to be standing right there, even if they did go into that house in the first place.
So the police went through and they pulled out a whole bunch of things that they said were dangerous objects. Like,
They
found dangerous objects.
Well, they found rocks and
Bits
nails.
of fence.
They found, what did they find? Well, the BZ, Berlin's quality newspaper, they tweeted about the police confiscating dangerous objects. And the picture they tweeted with it was a police officer carrying an antenna and an old satellite dish from the roof. And, you know, you could throw that down on police. I just hope the police don't figure out that the entire house is made out of bricks. You know, that the entire house is just one dangerous object by those standards. So they confiscated metal bars, a shopping cart,
Fire extinguisher, I think I saw.
fire extinguisher,
They're very dangerous.
gas bottle, 10 tons of coal in the basement because they have a coal heater.
Suspicious
Yeah.
coal.
It does burn very well, yeah.
So what I'm interested in, John, is why is this happening now? Because it seems to me that there hasn't been much in the way of antagonism between the police and the left-wing, scene for a long time. And in fact, there's not really any reason to. The number of car burnings is really, really down. Although there were car burnings in retaliation for this, we should mention that. But it seems that this is a really odd time for this to be flaring up. It seems like there's no reason for it. This is sort of an anachronism, the idea of this, the left-wing threat. It's dying down to the point where it's almost a tourist attraction, right? So what's with the police overreaction?
I think the weirdest part about this context is we have seen the biggest wave of racist violence in Germany since at least the 1990s, maybe since the 1930s in the last year. Just in the last couple of days, we've seen asylum seekers' homes getting set on fire. We had that incident in Klausnitz, I think it was called, where a mob was attacking asylum seekers and the police were attacking the refugees who were being attacked by asylum seekers. And the police are always saying, they're always using that word überfordert, like they're being overwhelmed by, they just can't do anything against this racist violence. So the fact that they have, and it's not just this one incident in the Rigaer Straße with the 500 police. There's police there around the clock. There's interviews in the paper, someone who works in a child care center talking about being controlled all the time on the street, And this is affecting thousands of people. This is a huge police operation. I think there's two fundamental reasons for it. One is just good old Berlin gentrification. The Rigaer Straße is a very strange mixture of these run-down, very old, squatted houses right next to brand new luxury condos. And there's a lot of money to be made in tearing down these old squats and putting in new things there. And the people who are ordering this are what's fundamentally Berlin's interior minister, Frank Henkel from the CDU. And the CDU has always been the political arm of Berlin's realty speculator mafia, and so it's just good business, I think, to get these people out. And on the other hand, we've got elections coming up, and the CDU has kind of a problem because they're in government right now. They're in coalition with the SPD. They don't really have much of a profile, except for being even more corrupt than their partners in government. And so I think mostly what's going on right now is electioneering, that Frank Henkel needs some brand name. Why should people vote for Henkel instead of voting for the SPD? They're about the same. And so Henkel needs a profile as the one who's really going to stick it to lefties.
And he's been cracking down on Görlitzer Park weed sales as well. And so, but why not crack down on the right-wing extremists? Does he need their vote?
Well, yeah. The CDU is having this problem, right? That they're being threatened by the right, by the AfD and by other right-wing populists, and so they're trying to hold on to these votes. They're trying to say, don't vote for some crazy racist right-wing populist. We as the CDU can do everything the AfD is asking for. We're much more effective in it.
You want fascism? We'll give you fascism.
Well, now just hang on a bit, because we should put a little bit of balance into this. On the same night, there was a big protest, by the way, counter-protest against the raids a couple of weeks after the raids happened. On the same night, there were 24 cars smashed up and burnt in front of some flats at Gleisdreieck. And there was an office of the Quartiers management in Neukölln smashed up, and an anonymous left-wing blog claimed that protesters were planning to extract €1 million in damages for every time the police raided somewhere. So is it entirely true to say that the left is harmless?
I don't know. I don't own a car. Does anyone here own a car? Look, This German comedian, Marco Wickling, he explained it, in my opinion, really well. He was talking about, he always has these conversations with his kangaroo, or a kangaroo, not his kangaroo. And he was saying, all this right-wing violence, left-wing violence, it's pretty much the same, right? Aren't they all extremists? And the kangaroo says, no, it's not the same at all. Right-wingers, they burn, let me get this right. Left-wingers, they burn cars, and right-wingers, they burn foreigners. And burning cars is worse because I own a car and I don't own any foreigners.
I guess to put that in context, the numbers tell us that the number of right-wing extreme crimes rose 30% in 2015. So that's quite a significant number. And as you said, it does involve a lot of attacks on asylum seeker homes, burnings. Grenade was thrown at one asylum seeker home, I understand. So yeah, it's getting pretty scary on that side. But they're still raiding up there, though, right? It's still going on in Rigaer Straße, nothing resolved.
Like a Civil War area, yeah. Police checkpoints all over the place, supposedly random controls. I wouldn't try to go there with colorful hair or dreadlocks or anything like that.
Well, tell us this, how many squats are actually left in Berlin?
It's hard to say, but there were so many squats in the 1980s. At the high point, there were supposedly something like 300 that were publicly known. But in the 1990s, there was the strategy of the government was to split the squatters movement by kicking out about half of them and legalizing the other half. So most of the things that we think of as squats today actually do have some kind of deal with the city or whoever owns the houses or the property. So squats, I don't really think there are any. Like people who are just in a house and it doesn't belong to anyone or they're there illegally. I'm happy to be corrected, but I think almost everybody has some kind of deal with the city, some kind of long-term lease, and they're paying some symbolic rent, but they actually do have a legal right to be there.
Even Kopi?
Exactly, yeah. Kopi is, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but yeah, somebody owns it, and they have some kind of lease with whoever owns it.
Right.
Ask them.
So as I said, I think Berlin, rather than trying to raid these squats, they should be, if they were really cynical, they'd contact that tourism office instead of 3625 or whatever the slogan is. They'd be like, come and see our last squat, because that's actually what tourists are probably more interested in anyway.
People aren't going to Berlin for the empty luxury condos and office spaces everywhere. That's not something you read about much in The Lonely Planet.
John, while we've got you sitting here, we might as well see if you've got anything to say about our next news topic as well. You don't have to say anything at all as well, by the way. And that is?
Yeah, Joel, you already announced at the start of the show the Rote Armee-Fraktion is back in the headlines. What's that about?
So this is more of a national German story, which we don't usually cover on Radio Spaetkauf. We're very, very Berlin. But still, it's an interesting one, so I want to talk about it. So the police said that they found DNA at a crime scene belonging to some members of the RAF, who were still on the run. Now, the RAF are better known as the Baader-Meinhof gang, and they were a terrorist gang of West German white people who were against the state and capitalism. And in the 70s and in the 80s, they were responsible for bombing and killing prominent business and political leaders in West Germany. It's kind of crazy to think about it, that there was this sort of Germans were once, running around killing other Germans, and it was terrorism. These days, we think terrorism can only be, one type of person from one certain part of the world, but it had a much broader meaning back in the 70s and 80s. So the thing about the Baader-Meinhof gang is that many of them were caught or killed. But amazingly, some of them have still been underground and on the run all this time. They haven't been heard of for years, but police said that the DNA of 3 of the gang members was found on the scene of an attempted robbery of an armoured vehicle carrying money up near Bremen in the north. Now, the robbery was unsuccessful, so they're still on the run and presumably with less money than they had before. So I just find it fascinating that the RAF are still out there, that they've managed to survive this long with all the surveillance that's going on in society, and no doubt the police have really been onto them. I find this fascinating. John, anything to say about that?
I don't think they even know who the last generation of the RAF was. So it's amazing too that there's so much secrecy around it. I wouldn't discount the German state secret services were always involved in the RAF at low levels. So it could. There's all kinds of dodgy people getting paid tax money, both in Nazi groups and in these kind of left-wing terrorist organizations.
What, as informants or what?
Exactly, yeah. State agents. That there was one big bombing by the RAF where it turned out I want to say the Secret Service of Lower Saxony was behind it. So you never know. Maybe in a time when there's right-wing terrorism is all over the news, where it's indisputable that the state was involved in financing the National Socialist Underground for many years. Yeah, maybe they needed get out some old agents who were involved in the RAF back then and say, hey, let's make sure we get some balance here. Let's make sure we get everyone talking about left-wing terrorism too.
Well, I want to thank John for joining us on Radio Spaetkauf. Thanks very much for your insight, and hopefully we'll have you back sometime. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
While we are on the topic of terrorism, there has been a fair bit of talk these days about terrorist threats in Berlin. And we were wondering, should we be talking about that sort of stuff on the show?
So my perspective on this was that, the last couple of weeks there's been a couple of major terrorist threats where the police have said, we've found evidence of this or that going to happen at this or that place, and, newspaper headlines screaming out warnings and so forth. And basically, I was wondering whether we should have a little editorial chat here, blokes, about whether or not we should be talking about these things and whether they're relevant and if they actually help for us to discuss them. Because, I mean, on the one side, they're major international news headlines. A lot of international media report that, Berlin police say that the imminent threat and blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, these threats, all they do is serve to be alarmist and get people worried and concerned and fearful, which is exactly what both terrorist organizations and controlling politicians want. And my thought is that unless it's actually happened, that we're not going to be really doing anyone any service by sort of bringing up these police alleged threats that may or may not occur. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I would agree with that. I wouldn't want to start any fear mongering amongst the listeners.
I don't know. I spend like a lot of time, I was just back in the States, and I do talk to people who don't live in Berlin. And I think this podcast kind of reaches people who don't live in Berlin. And that is like a conversation that's a broader conversation that's happening about the city. Like people ask me, like, I go back, they ask me all stupid questions like, do you feel safe? And, it's like.
People ask you if you feel safe in Berlin?
Yeah, I'll be in the States and I'll be like, statistically speaking, we're already being shot right now. Like it's. And I mean, I think it's maybe worth addressing, like, how we could just, I mean, like, if the headlines, I'll sometimes see, like, tabloid headlines, like, big black and white, like, we're all gonna die, or whatever, and, like, I mean, we could also have our own headlines, like, we're fine, what's new, not much, like, I think that's, I mean, is there an antonym to fear-mongering?
Peace-mongering.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know.
Okay, so unless they happen, I don't think we should talk about them.
But, okay. We will cover.
The other point is that police rarely tell you about a terror raid or a threat unless they've already successfully neutered it, because they don't want to look stupid. So the only reason they're going to tell you that is to show off that they either to scare you into so that they get more money for the police departments, or to show off that they've done a job or something like that. So really, it's never really going to help you to know in advance, because either they would be working on it or they wouldn't tell you.
Sure. I would like to know what color level the threat level is at this point. Are we at orange?
Currywurst thread.
Okay. All right. Now in small business news. Okay. So I spent this isn't the intro that Joel wrote for me, but I liked on my way over here, like I'll grab like a BZ or some newspaper that I'm somewhat capable of reading. So like I'm up to the minute on what's going on in Berlin, and then I spent 15 minutes circling. I should have exaggerated there, but it felt like a long time. Like circling the blocks trying to buy a fucking newspaper
On a Sunday
in Neukölln, and every single Späti is closed right now. And also I needed a Snickers because my blood sugar was low, and that didn't help the fact that I was getting really, there were 20 places I could buy a roll and or play a slot machine, but I couldn't get a fucking newspaper. With more on this story.
Well, something's happening. Neukölln Spaetkauf operators have now joined together to create an association to fight against this prosecution, because really it's very localized as well, because in Pankow or really wherever else but Kreuzberg and Neukölln, the local governments aren't cracking down on Spätis being open on Sundays.
Yeah, I left my house today. There was the one next to my house. I'm like, I will wait to buy my newspaper to support the neighborhood in which I record my podcast. And fact.
So the city, the Spaetkauf operators around here are joining together to try and do something about it. Don't know what they could really do, but they're at least
unifying their voice.
They're going to try and make a stir about it in local politics, because if the city government up in Pankow doesn't prosecute, why are they doing it down here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the point, basically. And as you pointed out, there's plenty of businesses that do operate on Sundays, regardless of whatever this law is.
I saw people on bikes, teenagers on bikes, riding around delivering Thai food or whatever for fucking Deliveroo, and that's fine. But I can't get an iron and a newspaper. It's just insane.
Maybe you could if you ordered it through them.
What's that?
You could order a newspaper.
It's right. Yeah. If I had the right app, I could order a newspaper. That's exactly
Späti
right.
app, business idea, brilliant.
Do we have? So we can go through Berliner Späti e.V. to do our part.
We can. Our part being maybe trying to see if we can influence local politics ourselves directly by sticking Yuri up as a candidate for the Spaetkauf party, which, we're not joking, we may actually do this.
Despite the fact Yuri is dead set against.
No, he's not happy about it.
He does not want to do this. But me and Joel think it's a great idea, and we don't care if he wants to run.
Can just someone else be the politician in question?
We don't have the right citizenship. Sorry.
Yuri is going to be our stooge. We may eventually... This is an election year coming up. In September this year, there's going to be a local government election. Everything's up for grabs, all the local seats. And so if we could somehow nudge the Neukölln city government in the direction of not cracking down on Spaetkaufs through the influence of one Mr. Joeran Mandik, then maybe we should try and do so. Can we all count on your vote? That's the important question.
Yeah, there you go. Yuri.
Yeah, all right, I'm in.
Okay, cool. You're just a puppet. It's not that hard.
We're the puppet. We're in charge. Don't worry. We'll tell you what to say.
Cool.
All right.
Well, while we're on small business news, the Bizim Bakkal supermarket in Rigaer Straße that had started a social movement is now sadly going to close down.
So last year, the residents of Rangelkiez and Kreuzberg joined a massive campaign to try and save a local grocery store called Bizim Bakkal. And they successfully shamed the landlord there into actually backing down on plans to kick out that local supermarket and to let them stay there on an affordable contract. But unfortunately, now the news has come through that the shop is going to close anyway because the manager says he's suffering from health problems, and some of them related to the stress of the whole issue of the campaign, or not the campaign, but the eviction that was going to occur. So unfortunately, the shop is going to close, but the campaign really did create a local movement there that's continuing today to fight against rent hikes. If you go through Kreuzberg anyway, you're going to see lots of signs that say something about Bizim Bakkal everywhere, and now it's sort of a bit more amorphous. It's not actually related to an existing shop. It's more of an idea about trying to keep things affordable in the Kiez.
So in death, the supermarket is even more powerful than we possibly imagined. That's a martyr.
So that was small business news. On to big business news. Yuri, apparently Berlin is booming in terms of the amount of money coming here. The city's received more venture capital in 2015 than any other city in Europe.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the second year in a row, actually, that Berlin has beat London to that top spot in the venture capital ranking. The total amount that was poured into Berlin was 2.1 billion euros into new startups that we've seen around, like those food delivery things.
So it's really influencing the city in a big way. Lots of money flooding in here. There's actually a lot of jobs being created too. So if you're out of work, there's a lot of internet companies that are hiring and then firing very, very quickly afterwards as well. It's a pretty short-lived career when you're working in startups, let me tell you. But yeah, that's really having a big influence on the city. In fact, I'm sure we could link the previous story directly to the story we just read there. They're quite related.
Radio Spaetkauf.
All right, moving into public transport news. Berlin is set to get some fancy-looking new S-Bahn trains.
That's correct. The new contract that will, running the S-Bahn until 2035 has now been signed last week by Deutsche Bahn, who won that tender process. And first of all, that tender process took a lot longer than thought. It took about 3 years longer. It was supposed to be done in 2012, took till the end of 2015.
It was only ever going to be Deutsche Bahn winning it anyway, though, wasn't it? Anyway, sorry.
There were a few other bidders, but because the S-Bahn needed new trains and a few other things, it became super complicated and expensive, so everybody got scared except Deutsche Bahn, and they were left the only bidders. And so it had a pretty good bargaining power, which is why... partially why it got very expensive. And now on top of that, because it took 3 years longer, the old trains need to be outfitted or updated to be able to run those additional 3 years, which will cost another 160 million euros thereabouts.
What kind of trains are we going to get?
Oh yeah, the design details have been released or published, and there are a few cool features. For example, there'll be screens showing you the route and upcoming stations, which is something that most cities in the world have, and we don't. So that's good. And one very exciting thing is that they're going to apply some technical workings that have been applied in Oslo to keep trains from breaking down when it's cold.
That's because there were a few trains routes scrapped this year when it snowed.
Huh.
Yeah, I've seen
right.
pictures of them. They've got like this really cool flat screen front, don't they? They really look,
Yeah.
look super. And air conditioning too, I hear,
Yes, they're air conditioned.
for that 2 days of a year when it's hot.
And a good thing, like it's expensive, but another reason why it's expensive, the cost for those 106 trains that have been ordered is 900 million euros. They could have had it cheaper if the work for them would have been outsourced, but Deutsche Bahn decided, and I guess the Berlin Senate had a word to say there too, decided to keep the work in Berlin. And so now Stadler in Pankow are going to build those trains with parts from Siemens as well. And the design was also done by a Berlin design company.
So you can get a job in Deutsche Bahn if you can't get one at a startup.
It's crazy how much cheaper trains are than websites. Like, I don't know. I've never made either, but it just seems like 2 billion for websites and like 160 million for 3 years of trains. That's like, trains are cheap.
Those 160 million are just train repairs.
Oh, okay.
No,
Fair enough.
You make
Fair
a valid
enough.
point,
But
Daniel. The disconnection of the real economy from the startup economy is quite staggering when you think about it. Hey, what happened at the U-Bahn station, the U9 U-Bahn line, Daniel?
oh, that's right. We had a little art prankster put some fun stuff in the train tunnel there. Do you have any information about that, Joel?
So there's... We just messed up our intros. Apparently, I'm the one who's meant to be talking about it. So yeah, someone set up what looks like a film set of a bedroom with...
Wait. What? Just to explain what happened was, I sent this article to Joel, and he assumed that I'd read it, so that I could comment on it. That's what was happening. Go ahead, Joel. You read the article.
There's too much curtain being pulled back here. So a hidden apartment was discovered on an U-Bahn service tunnel. So not actually a train tunnel, but like a connecting bit that goes between the different tunnels. Someone set up what looked like to be a film set of a bedroom with a neatly made bed, television, lounge chair, pot plant, and even wallpaper. And the BFLG was completely surprised by this discovery. It actually appears to have been there for quite a long time, and the BFLG presumes it was some kind of art prank, like by someone from what they call the sprayer scene, which means graffiti artists. So they situation artists trucked in a bunch of furniture, set up a bedroom, and just left it there to be found. And
That's great.
The saddest part about this is that the BFLG removed it all.
Of course.
I love that this made our public transport news segment.
Just keep your eyes peeled. You never know when there will be an apartment next to or some other art.
In other public transport news, there's going to be a chance to ride some really, really old U-Bahn carriages on next Sunday.
Yeah, that's right. To commemorate the 50th anniversary of the opening of the U6 extension between Tempelhof and Mariendorf, the BVG will run a couple of very, very old trains, 2 different models built between 1927 and 1929, that is before Hitler.
Wow.
And the models are called B2 and C2. And they'll be running between Seestraße and Altmariendorf on Sunday next week, the 28th
Nice.
of February.
But of course, these are not wheelchair accessible trains, are they?
No, unfortunately not. They weren't thinking that way.
And as you pointed out, Yuri, that this line was actually constructed incredibly quickly. They used to do things a lot quicker back in the old days, didn't they?
Yeah, that's a good comparison. They built 5 stations between Tempelhof and Altmariendorf in the 60s. And it took them 5 years to build these 5 stations. And just for comparison, the construction of the 3 stations between Alexanderplatz and Brandenburger Tor began in 2010. And they're planning to open in 2009, which is 9 years. But we all know it's going to be like another 3 years at least.
Well, to be fair, they do have to dodge, like bombs and ruins going through the middle of Mitte that they might not have had to do up it. Well, maybe they did.
There might have been a few more of those even in the 60s.
It's time for some sports news, which
All
is
right.
a new feature on Radio Spaetkauf. The last couple of episodes, Daniel is bringing us all the action on the fields and courts.
So Hertha, that's one of Berlin's major soccer teams, has reached the semifinal of the German Football Cup for the first time in 35 years. They won their quarterfinal match against Heidenheim, 3-2. And in the semifinals, they're going to be facing Dortmund, Borussia Dortmund, who they played a couple of weeks ago in a match that ended 0 points to 0 points.
So anything could happen.
Yes, or nothing. So that game will be played here on their home pitch at Olympiastadion on April 20th. That's what it says there.
Well, football fans are really excited about this. This is Berlin's home team, who've been
One of Berlin's home teams.
they've been crap for years and years and years and years, and finally they're reaching the semi-final. I mean, this is big stuff, isn't it? You like.
Yeah, I think they're happy about it, the fans. Sure.
Well, Dan, I've got to thank you for bringing this segment to the show, this sports segment. I never used to care about sport, but now I've been paying attention to the sports pages a bit more. I mean, I used to only look at the sports pages to check out the muscly men, but now I'm actually trying to read about the content as well. And I read an interesting story about how Hertha apparently is using Moneyball type tactics. That's how they've been getting ahead so quickly this season. Is that they've been doing this, really using data to figure out which players they should put at which positions and so forth. And this is actually the secret behind their success this year. Oh, that was pretty cool.
That is cool.
They also have a new coach, though.
They have a new coach, tactics. If you do want to go and see that game, which is going to be a big deal, the tickets go on sale on the 1st of March for general punters, and you're going to have to line up just like at Berlinale and hope you can get a seat.
I went to the stadium a few weeks ago to see that other Dortmund game, and it's actually so hard to get into the stadium. Everyone just funnels into these 3 entrances, and it's very hard. I had to wait for like half an hour.
Bad architecture? You should write to Albert Speer and make a complaint.
Yeah.
People got that joke. Good. Person.
In culture news, Berlinale is over, and the main prize this year went to a documentary about refugees.
So the Berlin International Film Festival closes actually today as we're recording, and the Berlinale top prize went this year to a documentary whose name translates as Fire at Sea, which is about refugees on the Italian island of Lampedusa. So it's a very timely and political statement that the jury there was making. Actually, you know what? I've never really actually paid much attention to Berlinale when it's on because it's pretty much impossible to get tickets.
No, it's much easier than you'd think.
Yeah?
Yeah, all you have to do is not really have a day job. And you can waltz right over to Potsdamerplatz and get tickets to lots of cool movies.
So basically,
keep that in mind for next year.
My resolution is to go back and try and watch all of the winners of the Berlinale film because obviously they're picking good movies and now they're ones you'll never actually see in other places or other cinemas because they're usually international kind of big productions that don't get much attention.
You're talking about the Golden Bear winners?
The Golden Bear winners, yeah. So this is one, so I'm going to make an effort to go and watch it.
Can I come?
I'll watch it at home. You're welcome.
It sounds pretty grim. Like it's not like a fun refugee movie. I mean, interviews. It's like this dude at sea. No, don't laugh. It's terrible. Like
fun refugee movie.
No, I mean it's like he really. I read interviews with the director today, and he was the filmmaker, and he was talking about being in situations where you shouldn't questioning whether or not he should be pointing cameras at scenes that are just horrifying. People at sea suffocating from diesel fumes and overpacked boats and things like that. And it's like, I mean, yeah. I mean, it was, yeah.
I guess it's one of those important topics that you should watch anyway, so we understand what's going on in the city. Like, why are we talking about all these topics in Berlin about our music festivals being moved and asylum seeker homes and so forth, and it all stems from that, and I guess it's really important to realize what people have to go through to try and get here and maybe have a bit of empathy about that, sympathy.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to give some cultural shout-outs. This is our culture news segment to some events that are coming up in Berlin in the next couple of weeks related to basically our friends. We'll be honest about that.
Who are good people and talented.
As well. So the first shout out is for the band Volk, very good friends of ours. They do a fantastic kind of duo blues rock style, and they put on a really fun show. The sad news is Volk, who've been around in Berlin for a couple of years, have decided to leave the city. So their last show is going to be on March 3 at the Bar Monarch. Make sure you get along and give them a good clap and thank them for their years of service to the Berlin music scene.
Mm-hmm.
We've got another event to announce, which is the Berlin Feminist Film Week, which is coming up on March 8th. That's when it starts, Tuesday, March 8th. That's International Women's Day. So this is a festival. The goal is basically to try and promote female directors, producers, and main characters in order to give a bit of balance, because the festival's director, whose name is Karen Fornander, she's a regular guest here at Radio Spaetkauf. She points out that basically most of the top jobs in Hollywood still go to women, and in the film industry around the world. So to men, sorry, yeah. So she's trying to put a bit of rebalance into that by putting on a great program of films. It goes for 7 days in different locations all around Berlin. One of the big topics is going to be about fat shaming, which is a new topic that's really emerging in the feminist discussions at the moment. People made to feel guilty about their size, and the argument goes that no one should have anything to say about whether you're fat or not. So it's an interesting topic. So make sure you check out Berlin Feminist Film Week, and you can find that on the internet for sure. Mm-hmm. The last event announcement we've got coming up is a really cool new series called The Culture Club, which is presented by a guy named Craig Schuftan. And anyone who's an Australian living in Berlin will definitely recognize this guy's voice, because he's been a presenter on the infamous radio station Triple J for a long time. So he's going to be doing a new event which is called The Culture Club, which is a mashup of a lecture and a visual presentation, focusing on fascinating topics about cultural history and pop culture. It's sort of like a lecture, images, and you come away very informed, much like our show here, I hope. The first one's going to be Friday, March 24 at Kino Babylon. And you can find out more details by checking out the Mobile Kino page, because the Mobile Kino team are involved in promoting that one there.
And I would like to take the chance here as well to self-promote a little bit.
Nice.
I've been working on another podcast on the side, which is called the Ghost Story Reading Club. Ghost Story Reading Club. When I say it that fast, people always ask me, what was it? Maybe we should have chosen a better name.
What's the Ghost Story Reading Club?
It's a podcast where we kind of look into different themes of horror, a different theme every week, and we read a couple of stories, one classic story and a modern story, short stories, and also have a guest on to talk about themes of horror and stuff. First episode's on SoundCloud. It's called Ghost Story Reading Club.
Just before we go, I want to give a little bit of an update on one story that we mentioned a couple of podcasts ago. It's about a guy who's been imprisoned. His name is Arvid O, and he was jailed for running the website Kinox.to, which I'm sure many people in this room have at least once in their life used to stream something. So he was jailed by a court in Leipzig for a couple of years for running that site. And I think we should all show a bit of solidarity with the guy, since he did us all a service. I actually called up his lawyer, but it did a bit of journalism.
What?
Yeah, and I asked what's going on there. He says they're actually going to appeal the case on the grounds that the website actually didn't host any pirated content at all, but it was just linking to other sites that did. So he can't legitimately you can't legitimately be alleged that he actually pirated anything, because he never uploaded or downloaded a single file. But also, we've got an email address here that if you do feel like writing a letter to the guy just to say, hey, sorry you're in jail because I got to stream a movie, I will be, and I'm legitimately, I'm serious about this. I think we should all be doing this. I mean, these people go out and, do these workarounds. We take advantage of them, and then we shouldn't just forget them when they're thrown away as a result of us all enjoying their services. So anyway, I've got an email address here. I'm going to stick it up on our Facebook page, and I do encourage you to
probably don't write down thanks for the free movies,
don't incriminate yourself in the email.
Something like, thank you for supplying links to websites that do whatever. That might be a good subject line. Before we go, we just want to say, if you're listening to us on iTunes, comment or rate or review or something. We don't get any information about how anyone listens to or finds us on the internet. So let us know if it's Stitcher or SoundCloud, or how you're getting this podcast to you, because we would like to get it to more people, and we're trying to figure out how the internet works, I guess. I don't know what I'm talking about. If you know what I'm talking about, please tell me. So that would be great. We just don't know if anyone listens, basically.
We also have an email address that is hallo@Radio Spaetkauf with AE for the Spät. .com. Hallo@radiospaetkauf.com.
And we're also going to start sending out a newsletter soon with regular updates about all these kind of topics that we've been talking to you about, so sign up for that as well. And it would be great to get some feedback from the audience. So without further ado, I think we've reached the end of our newsletter.
What? Well, cool. Then we should, first of all, thank everyone who came out today. Great audience. This is the most people I think we've had, so
Give yourself a clap,
it's really fun.
We're going to be back in exactly 1 month. We'll give you. You'll watch our Facebook page for more details. Thanks also to Joss, who's been helping us out with technical stuff today, and Victoria Linchong, who's been doing video.
Donnell 115 is our always great host.
Yeah. And
thank you to Yuri very much. Thank you, Yuri.
thank you, Dan.
And thank you, Joel. Joel does pretty much all the work. So I really appreciate that because we like good guy.
We need you to make us laugh, Dan.
All right.
We're going to wrap up. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Radio Spaetkauf.